Hello there, Peter from Universal Dork. I'm back again in a very different location than what you've seen before. I'm actually in my bedroom right now. I just thought I would throw this together to try to make a little video because the store, Hollywood Babylon in Portland, Oregon, is on temporary hiatus. So everything has been moved into a storage space and we are on the hunt for a brand new location. And I just thought that, the show must go on. So it's been a very busy week of moving stuff around and, quite honestly, a little bit emotional as well because that was over 14 years in that location. So even though I'm excited about finding the new spot, it's still a little bit weird having this brand new chapter ahead of me and behind me. But anyway, enough about that. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on here with this kind of new look that's happening. So yeah, I'm here in my bedroom, the perfect place to do YouTube videos, right? So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about a topic that I normally don't cover on here, which is Marvel MCU stuff. And, for me, I've been thinking a lot about that for a while on whether or not I even want to cover that sort of hype machine. But if you're familiar with my blog, Universal Dork, that has been around for over 15 years, you'll know that I covered a lot of comic book related stuff and even touched upon some of the Marvel stuff because I've been a comic book collector ever since I was a kid, probably starting really in the late 70s, but definitely throughout the 80s, all the way through. Was a huge fan of Marvel Comics and also through the 90s as well. And, the 2000s on and off. There was some good stuff in the 2000s, and then, I'd say probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I just gave up on comic books entirely. They were too expensive. The panels have gotten way too big, so it takes 5 minutes or less to read a comic book now. And also, to be quite honest, I wasn't too impressed with most of the stories that I was seeing or the artwork. So those things for me, as far as comic books go, pretty hand in hand. And I just sort of given up on Marvel entirely. I was reading some of the Hellboy stuff and the Magnolaverse, the BPRD. But honestly, I guess it just was feeling like the comic books just weren't being made for me anymore. They were feeling a little bit too close to reality in the modern world. And with the internet now being everyone's main focus of things, it's how much time do I want to spend in the real world with comic books? I want to go and read a comic book and, escape to a different place. I don't want to be reminded of all the weird stuff that's going on in the world. I don't want to be reminded of politics, even though I know that even in some of my favorite comic books, there were sort of politics of the times that were subtly inserting themselves into storylines. But everything these days now feels way too on the nose. And an interesting thing that I read is that a lot of these streaming services, and I assume probably Marvel Comics in general and MCU stuff, they're actually producing content now. Now that word content is a big part of this because for one thing, for this YouTube channel, I never want to call this content that I'm doing here. I really don't like that word and I feel like that's being used way too often now. And everything does indeed feel a lot like content, like it was made on a conveyor belt. But I digress. This article went over how streaming services are pumping out content like movies and streaming shows that have been intentionally dumbed down for the masses because people apparently now have such low attention spans that they will immediately grab their phone and start scrolling while they're watching a movie. Now, that is, of course, I think sort of pathetic behavior, and I am guilty of that as well. I have done that a lot, but in my defense, I normally do that sort of pathetic style behavior when the show that I'm watching is not compelling or it feels dumbed down, like this makes a lot of sense now, spoon feeding you plot points, narratives, and a lot of times virtue signaling. So this stuff in the 80s used to be done quite well, but it was subtly implied in movies and you would get slight undertones and it would leave you with something to think about. That is not the case nowadays. Nowadays, they need to shove it directly down your throat because they know that the person who is watching the show is most likely looking at Instagram, TikTok, or whatever other bullshit that we're addicted to nowadays. So I decided today that I needed to touch upon this Marvel Comics thing. I've been thinking about the MCU stuff because I used to go see all of those movies all the time, like religiously. When Marvel would release movies, I would be at the theater, and just the whole experience of going to see the Marvel stuff at the theater was always so special to me. Even though I feel like the MCU didn't really pan out to be exactly what the younger version of myself would have dreamt it was. If you'd have told me back in the 1980s that all of my favorite comic book characters, the Avengers and, the X-Men and the Hulk, they would all be on the big screen and be making tons of money. This is not how I would have pictured it in my head. But, I'm an old school comic book fan, and I realize that probably these movies aren't really being made for me. But I found it very interesting today because I checked out a trailer for the newest MCU film, The Fantastic Four. I think it's called First Steps. And to be quite honest, I had a pretty good feeling about it. I was not expecting much, and I threw on this kind of teaser trailer, and kind of what unfolded onto the screen was a bit of a delight, to be honest. Now, that's not to say that I thought everything about it was totally rad, but they have given this Fantastic Four thing a try, I think first in 1994. I've heard YouTubers talking about this trailer and saying that this is the third attempt at the Fantastic Four for the big screen. Now, technically they're correct, but I believe it was 1994 or 93, there was the Roger Corman-produced Fantastic Four film. And most people probably don't remember that. If you do, let me know in the comments, because that means you're old school or you really got your finger on the pulse of sort of schlocky cinema, because there was that Fantastic Four film from 1994 that never came out. And I've seen that thing several times, and I think it's sort of charming in a way. It totally sucks, the special effects, but part of me would actually prefer the schlocky effects of the 90s Fantastic Four film with largely practical effects and some shoddy digital stuff added in there as well over a lot of this bloated CGI stuff. But this trailer today, it kind of brought back that feeling of the old MCU at the very least. And the very interesting thing about this Fantastic Four film does take place in the 1960s, and actually I think sort of captures that vibe of the original comic books. Now, there are certain things in it, like Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards. Not quite sure that totally works for me. He's got a mustache and stuff. I just don't think that when I see him, it doesn't immediately register in my brain like that is Reed Richards. So I'm not quite sure if that casting choice was really all that great. I like him as an actor. I think he's totally talented, but he doesn't scream Reed Richards to me. So that is a little bit of a downside. Now, we've also got a good look here at Ben Grimm, the Thing. One of the other reasons why I feel like I had to cover this MCU topic here is because I loved the Fantastic Four and the Thing so much that my 1990s band I was in, we toured all around the US and stuff, was called Ben Grimm, and it was named after the character The Thing. So I, as a kid, was a gigantic fan of The Thing, and the first look at The Thing here, I think he looks pretty good. I mean, it does look like CGI. Obviously, Marvel really has no interest in doing practical effects, and I will never, ever expect practical effects in a MCU film anymore. I mean, even a lot of the characters running around at times in their costumes are CGI. The Black Panther was almost entirely CGI when they showed him in costume. So all that being said, I was pleasantly surprised at the look of Ben Grimm. He looks very comic accurate. I've really got no complaints there. I think they sort of nailed his look. And for me, a Fantastic Four film with a bad Thing or Ben Grimm is definitely going to, right off the bat, be a failure. And then, of course, we've got the Invisible Woman, who I, at the moment, can't remember who the actress is that is playing her, but she looks pretty comic accurate and looks pretty legit to me. So that's another thing this thing's got going for it. The guy playing the Human Torch, he seems fine as well. Didn't really get to see him in his, flame on version of the character. So the jury's out on that. But I gotta say, one of my favorite things that was included was Herbie the Robot. Now, I don't know if you've been watching my opening little title screen for this Universal Dork channel, but I basically used the header from the Universal Dork blog page. And if you notice that, I've got my arm right around Herbie the Robot right there. So the fact that they added Herbie the Robot into this equation was another big plus for me. So this looks to be, so far, a pretty sweet looking Fantastic Four film, something that I definitely was not prepared for. Going into this trailer, I was expecting the same old bullshit from Marvel. So I think that Marvel's probably looking at turning the tides a little bit and, reversing course here, because they've had so many damn failures under their belt since Disney took over the company. I mean, that's really when things started going downhill with Marvel. They've got so many damn amazing stories, amazing comic book stories that they could choose for, subject matter for some of these films, and really cool characters. I don't know why they've chosen to go running in the opposite direction here, because, man, when you have a catalog of comic book stories to choose from that are that well written and that beloved, and even some of like the lower level B, C level characters that they've chosen to bring onto the screen, they've chosen to do some pretty uninspiring things with those. And honestly, the choice of the characters that they're bringing onto the screen are not impressing me at all. I mean, I would have thought by now that we would have gotten a really cool Alpha Flight movie. That would have been great. They probably would have messed it up, but I think that those characters are ripe for the picking. You've got a really great cast, really great story. Like with Alpha Flight, you could take that first 12-issue run of their series from, I think, 1983 that John Byrne did. You could do a somewhat condensed version of that storyline with the death of Guardian and make that into an absolute banger of a heartfelt, emotional, action-packed, and shocking comic book film. There's so many to choose from. That's just one of mine. I love the Alpha Flight, but you could choose from so many different stories. I mean, I was even a little bit disappointed with the Deadpool and Wolverine thing. It was cool to see Wolverine in his costume, but man, if it was up to me, I would have chosen a much more classic storyline to put those two characters in. If they had to choose, could have taken them to Japan, and you could have had the whole thing not feel like such a farce. You still could have had Deadpool in there, shooting off his mouth, and had Wolverine, Hugh Jackman finally in the original costume. I still don't know why they're so stuck on this, yellow, blue, and black costume of Wolverine, because I think that his most classy version of his costume, which is sort of the tan, brown, and black one, I think that that's the best Wolverine costume. Still enjoyed myself in the theater. I didn't think that the story for Deadpool and Wolverine was really great, putting like internet drama in there and all sorts of inside MCU jokes. That just didn't resonate with me. I don't think that Ryan Reynolds is very funny as Deadpool. A lot of the jokes didn't land, but I appreciated the effort there that they were making to bring these two characters back into the fold and give Hugh Jackman another run as Wolverine. But I'm just going to say, overall, this Fantastic Four trailer looks to be on the right path. I think we even got a little glimpse of Galactus in there. There's a lot of different things that you could do with the Fantastic Four, and some really amazing storylines, especially from the John Byrne run in the 1980s. That was one of my favorites as a kid. Also, you could eventually, after a couple films, you could insert She-Hulk into the mix. That was one of my favorite things as a kid as well, is when the Thing left the Fantastic Four and went solo and he got his own book. I was so excited about that. I was already collecting like the Marvel 2-in-1 with The Thing, which featured The Thing in a monthly series where he would team up with different superheroes. A lot of times they would be random, weird B, C level, and then, some A-listers would join him as well. But he left, and Jennifer Walters, She-Hulk, joined the Fantastic Four. I remember back then that was a pretty big deal because his shoes are very hard to fill. But She-Hulk was the perfect addition to the Fantastic Four. I love that era of the Fantastic Four where there's She-Hulk and then coinciding with the Thing's solo adventures in his own comic book. That was a great time. Unfortunately, Marvel dropped the ball entirely on She-Hulk as well. I mean, how could you screw that up? The John Byrne run, again, John Byrne comes into this conversation a lot. He's one of my favorite artists, and I think he was a really solid writer back in the 1980s with the Fantastic Four. And then he also took She-Hulk, gave her one of the most unique comic books, breaking the fourth wall with some really solid comedy. And I think that they really messed up with the She-Hulk series because, like I said before, when you have back issues of comic books that have that solid of storylines that they put together back then that really resonated with people, it's so easy. You could just basically lift from, any one of those issues and you could have made a really incredible comedy She-Hulk series. Her job as the lawyer and all of these weird, bizarro characters that she would encounter. They tried to do that, but something was just really, really off with that series. The CGI, you didn't need a CGI She-Hulk. That CGI was god-awful. Anyway, I've got actually so much to say about the MCU. It's something that I think about a lot, even though my main focus on this channel is to cover sort of weird, underseen gems and weird horror movies and sci-fi stuff, and I do have a real strong love for the superhero genre and comic books. And that's what's sad about this, is that it's come to a point now with all of this stuff, I just don't care anymore. So it was very nice to actually see a trailer for a new Marvel movie. Now I'm going to give the Captain America movie a shot. I'll probably go see that this week. I actually don't think that looks too bad as well. I mean, the Red Hulk looks pretty crappy. The CGI, how is the CGI getting worse here? I really wish Marvel would get a lot more into using practical effects for things, making things feel more organic. But I do wish they would go way more sort of comic booky in their presentation of these characters, because a lot of this stuff, it looks like they're wearing Kevlar military stuff and someone who looks like he's employed by the US government to go run around and fight terrorists. I want to see a superhero. That's actually one thing that I'm quite pleased about with the James Gunn Superman trailer as well. I really like how James Gunn, just looking at these early depictions of the characters in his Superman trailer, it is feeling a lot like a comic book come to life. And, people are complaining about the Guy Gardner Green Lantern and his hairdo and his bowl cut and stuff. I'm like, that was one of my favorite parts of that trailer. So I think there might be hope for this Fantastic Four movie. And I'm quite surprised. And I'm actually, that little kid inside of me is kind of looking forward to checking it out. So anyway, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for joining me in this brand new location. I hope this isn't too chintzy. I really liked doing the show from the store, but for now, this is kind of fun. I got my, TV VCR on. I hope that's not too distracting, but I kind of like this thing, so I had to keep it into the frame here. So anyway, I will be back soon with some more sort of schlocky, weird stuff to cover, but from time to time, I am going to give you my opinion, because I've been a comic book collector for far too long to not have my own thoughts about all of these movies. Good seeing you again. I hope to see you soon. Hang in there. I'll see you next time.